What was it like writing for top TV comedies such as MASH, Cheers, and Frasier? Welcome back for part 2 of my conversation with Emmy winner Ken Levine this week on Brio TV, the podcast. Hi there, Bill Brio here, and welcome to part 2 of my conversation with TV writer, director, executive producer, blogger, podcaster, cartoonist, radio DJ, play-by-play announcer. I get winded just listing his incredible credits, Mr. Ken Levine. Last week, Ken talked about his incredibly cool sideline as a Major League Baseball play-by-play announcer and explained how he and his writing partner, David Issacs, launched their careers at the top, writing scripts for the great CBS sitcom MASH. This week, Ken talks about Frasier and especially his hard look at the reboot of the series, which is just back for a second season on Paramount+. Now, Ken thinks there's a place on TV for a modern, sophisticated comedy right now, but the new Frasier just ain't it as far as he's concerned. He also talks about one of the rare flops that he and Issacs made, a series that he's very proud of, but just didn't connect. And he singles out one episode of that show as his all-time favorite of anything the two of them have ever written for television. And he reaches way back to the black and white days to single out his all-time favorite TV sitcom and how one memorable episode of that classic inspired he and Issacs to craft something similar for a great episode of Cheers. So here he is again, starting with his decades-late spec script for the Dick Van Dyke Show. Yeah, that's right, Ken Levine. Were there ever shows that you thought, God, I wish I had been a TV writer back then working on this one or that one?
The Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah.
And I have a story about that, too.
Okay, that's great. Good.
When I was writing my blog, and I'm always looking for things to write about, I had the idea to write a spec Dick Van Dyke Show episode. And I wrote it, and I posted it on my blog, and I said, I'm going to get it to Carl and get it to Bill Persky, the two Dick Van Dyke Show producer writers who were still alive, and that I would get their feedback, good or bad, whatever. And Carl said he'd read it, but he never got around to it. But Bill Persky did.
Wow.
Bill Persky read it. And I called him and I said, okay, so what would your rejection letter say? And Bill goes, I would buy this.
Wow.
I would buy that. We would shoot this. This was fantastic. And I said, do you have any notes? What notes would you give me? And so we talked about the notes. It was like a story conference from 1964.
Wow.
So, well, I would have Laura come in and do this, and maybe Rob would do this, and Buddy could do that. And, and we're having this conversation. But even though I wrote the script 50 years too late, the fact that a Dick Van Dyke Show writer felt that my writing was good enough that he would hire me on the Dick Van Dyke Show is, to me, one of the truly great moments of my life and career.
That's fantastic. What a story. Ken, I had the good fortune to talk to Bill Persky. I had him as a guest on the podcast a couple of years ago. Still sharp as a tack. And
still sharp as a tack in his 90s. God bless him.
Yeah, he was amazing. Really sweet guy. And fun to talk to. So that is truly an opportunity for you. Good for you. With you and David, which one of you was Buddy Sorrell? Which one of you, was there a guy with the punchy joke, or was there?
No, in fact, early on in our career, we would always write the scripts together. The way we generally wrote scripts is we sat around a table and we had a writer's assistant who took shorthand and we dictated the script. But once a season, we would take a script assignment and I would write one act by myself and David would write one act by himself. And then we would put them together and do the polish together. And we did that so that we each felt comfortable that we could write on our own and that we were a partnership out of choice and not dependency. It's not like, I know I'm always an hour late, but I'm the funny one, And when you would read the two acts, it would be hard to tell whose was whose.
Wow.
And oftentimes, David and I would bounce lines back and forth, and I would pitch something and you go, well, what about if you did this version of it? And I would polish it and we would go back and forth. And people would say they'd see an episode and they'd say to me, oh, that was your joke. That was your joke.
Huh.
And I'd say, I don't remember. And it would sound like I was just being coy. But the truth is that I didn't, because our thumbprints are kind of on most everything.
Wow. So there were two good editors in the room as well as writers then.
Which is one of the reasons why we became a partnership.
Yeah.
Because you have somebody whose sense of humor that you really trust. So when you pitch something, if he laughs or thinks it's really funny, then you have something.
Wow. I think Persky said to me that one of them would type and the other would pace, and then they would take turns.
I think Sam would type and Bill would pace. Yeah.
That's incredible. I want to ask something too. You mentioned on the final episode of Hollywood and Levine, and by the way, I loved all the music on there. It was K-Earth 101 kind of sounds to me. I really thought it was very radio.
Well, I come from a radio background, and loved KHJ back in the Boss Radio days. And so I used that logo because it fit with Hollywood and Levine. And I'm friends with John Wolfert, who owns the company that makes all of the great radio station jingles in the world for all the different stations. And John graciously had them make a couple of jingles for me for the podcast. Now, many podcasts have their own jingles.
No, that was awesome. It was a great feature. But you were mentioning on the final episode that you were writing the blog daily by Ken Levine, and that back in the day you would take savage swings at the Oscars. You would review, you'd stay up all night and get it in. And and I remember, I was writing at the Toronto Sun tabloid and doing sort of the same, and it was fun. You got to sort of just make a lot of jokes. And you also were saying you couldn't do it today.
No, you couldn't.
Yeah, but you mentioned there was a Toronto newspaper that ran.
Yeah, I think it was the Toronto Sun.
Okay, must have been before my time. Well, I'm glad that they were smart enough to do that.
Yeah, that and a paper in London.
Wow.
That would reprint my savage, bitchy review in toto. So it's like, well, okay, a mainstream newspaper in Toronto thinks this is acceptable. Today, I would just get crushed.
Right.
For doing, the body shaming and, this is misogynist. And, it's like, you can't be snarky anymore.
Right. Although it's ironic, isn't it, that people who aren't writers can be as snarky as they want on Twitter. Like Twitter has almost replaced that voice in some ways, although it's not as artful. But in terms of being offensive. You know,
That's true. And I think people don't realize that when you go on Twitter or when you go on Facebook, that you are broadcasting to the world.
yeah,
So
exactly.
be careful.
Yeah. Um, yeah, we touched on your radio career, just mentioning that. I mean, you actually, when you started from listening to your podcasts, you weren't using your own name. You were actually the name of a famous TV character, right? On the air.
Yeah. I was a top 40 disc jockey in the early 70s. Back in those days, disc jockeys, most of them had phony names and they were all interchangeable. And they were usually like double first names. So it was, Mark Elliott, there's like 9 million Mark Elliots and Bob Morgan and, Chris Hayes and just like all these names that are completely forgettable. So I wanted a name that was memorable. So I came up with the name Beaver Cleaver
That's
because
great.
I figured the first night I go on a radio station and I say, "This is Beaver Cleaver," they're going to go, "What? Who?"
Yeah,
That
hilarious.
that there's going to be instant recall. And at the time, I was able to do a lot of double entendre jokes
Yes,
off the name.
I bet I
Um,
know. Yeah, I can guess where you're going with that.
yeah,
Did you ever hear from Jerry Mathers?
no, I never did. It's interesting. I got a job once. I'd been in San Diego, and I got a job once at a station in LA, K100, and I was using the name Beaver Cleaver. And at the time, K100 was overseen by this Uber radio consultant, Bill Drake, who created the whole KHJ Boss Radio format in the 60s that every station in the country copied. And I mean, this guy was the major domo of radio. And he had a program director who was like at the time probably in his late 40s, early 50s maybe. And so I'm hired and I'm at the station my first day. I'm going to go on the air at 6 o'clock and I'm sitting in the program director's office. It's like about 2:30 in the afternoon. And the disc jockey on the air promotes me and says, "Hey, tonight at 6 o'clock, Beaver Cleaver is coming on. And I wonder if Eddie Haskell and Lumpy are going to be in studio as guests,"
Right.
or something like that. And the program director turns to the speaker and he goes, "What? What was he, Lumpy? And what was he talking about?" And I said, "Oh, it's from Leave It to Beaver." And he goes,
Oh no.
what do you mean, Leave It to Beaver?"
Oh,
I said, "The television show, Leave It to Beaver."
wow. He thought you made up
Wait,
the
there was a
name.
television show?
Oh no.
I said, "Wait, so your name, that was the name that was on the
Oh,
television show?" He
wow.
says, "Yes." And he's going, "Oh my God. And we've already started promoting you and everything." I said, "What's the problem?" He goes, "Oh, the problem is we're going to get sued." And I said, "Look, if they come after you, it's going to get a lot of media attention.
That's true.
I'll just change my name
Yeah.
and it'll be a ton of free publicity." He goes, "Oh, no. I got to call Drake. I got to call Drake." And he calls Bill Drake and he goes, he says, "Bill, Ken is using the name Beaver Cleaver on the air." Bill goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Is it from a TV show?" Bill goes, "Yeah, Leave It to Beaver. Yeah."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Well, what happens if we get sued?" Bill says, well, probably get a lot of media attention. And you can just change his name. So what?
Well, great minds think alike.
Yeah. But I couldn't believe that this guy didn't know how are you, and this is 1974.
Yeah, wow.
How do you go through life and not know Leave It to Beaver?
That's only like 10 years after the show went off the air, like 1974. Like that isn't,
Yeah, it's in reruns. It's like, It's like if you say to somebody, I use the name of a character from The Office. And somebody goes, what's The Office?
Yeah.
And you go, you've never heard of the television show The Office?
No, it's not like you're referencing Francis X. Bushman or
exactly. Who I happen to know who Francis X. Bushman is. So
there you go. Thank God. We'll be back in a moment with Ken Levine. Super Channel's October schedule features 9 programming premieres. Among them is the new horror anthology series, Tales from the Void. It's premiering October 16th on Super Channel Fuse. This episodic horror anthology series is both thought-provoking and terrifying. It kind of began online where people started posting haunting stories that went viral. Some dealt with creepy dolls, others unexplained invasions. There were unsolved mysteries and serial murders, and each story paid homage to classic cult films from the 80s and 90s. These stories were gathered in what became known as the No Sleep podcast, where they are narrated audiobook style. Now they come to you in all their blood-curdling glory on Super Channel Fuse in Tales from the Void. 2 new episodes will premiere each week, with episodes also available same day on demand. And demand it you must! See it on Super Channel, finding new ways to keep you up at night this Halloween season. And here he is again, Ken Levine. I want to ask about, you were talking about your Oscar reviews. So I'm listening to the podcast. New Frasier comes on. A week or two goes by, a third week, and I'm thinking, God, I wonder what Ken Levine thinks about this show. And you went for it. You reviewed New Frasier. And after you guys created, wrote, produced Frasier, which is one of the greatest sitcoms. By the way, went back during COVID. My wife and I rewatched every episode. Holy crap, does that show hold up?
Thank you.
It's amazing. But you pointed out, where's Niles? This is like Laurel without Hardy. And you just went for it and explained what was wrong. Was this something you wrestled with? Did it take you a few weeks to say, oh, damn it, I'm going to do this? Or did you just decide to do it?
Here's what tipped it for me. Kelsey made some statement about how this show was better than the old one, that sometimes the old one was kind of silly or something. Something he said basically suggesting that this new version is better. And that pissed me off.
Nice.
And it's like, okay, screw you. I'm and look, it wasn't just a half an hour of me railing on, doing a Donald Trump, this is terrible and these people are awful, or I went through and I explained what was missing, what didn't work. They tried to do a farce scene in the opening episode, and they don't understand the rules of farce and why it didn't come off. So basically, I did it as what I hoped would be an instructive
Hmm.
podcast. Now, I'm sure those two showrunners who I've never met would run me over with their car if they had a chance to see me. But I was very disappointed. And the truth is, I was really, really rooting for that show to do well because I think there is a place in television for a modern, sophisticated show like
Hmm.
Frasier. And again, it doesn't have to be Frasier. It can be the Gen Z version of it, a Gen Z version of a sophisticated comedy, but there needs to be that. And I was hoping that Frasier would kind of relight that torch, and it didn't, and it was very disappointing.
Well, the word sophisticated was the element that's missing from
Right.
New Frasier. It's just another comedy premise. But you pointed out there really wasn't a motivation for this character or that. Why was this one here? What is
Uh-huh.
this one supposed to do after one episode? It just didn't seem to be built on anything. Um, I mean, the only thing I thought was TV comedy takes a while, right? I mean, Cheers being the great example to find its feet or find an audience.
It depends on the show. It depends on the time slot.
Mhm.
It depends on a lot of things. Um, yes, it took Cheers a year. We were in the basement. We were getting killed by Simon and Simon, and Tucker's Witch on
Oh no.
ABC was beating us. But then in the summer, when people who hadn't seen the show discovered the reruns, they they liked what they saw.
Mm.
And then the third season, Cosby came along, and that was a huge breakout hit. And high tide floats all boats. And all of a sudden, Cheers, like the third season, is a top five show. But it doesn't really reflect necessarily that the quality of the episodes were that much better season three
Uh,
than season one. In fact, I would submit that the first season of Cheers is the best season of Cheers. And I would put it up against the best season of any sitcom.
yeah. And would you say, my son is 31, and a few years ago he started watching Cheers, which he really, really liked. Different voice for him to see this show. But there is, it, did you feel at the time there's like kind of a sadness, right, with this show? I don't know. There's something about these people in the bar
Yeah,
every
these
night.
people are all losers. These people are all losers, and they come to this bar for their support system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Um, what a great cast. What was it refreshing for you as a writer, showrunner, to have cast changes? Obviously, MASH and Cheers were two shows where some very significant people were in and out, right? Did that help?
Right. It was especially significant on MASH because on MASH, you're locked into that time and space.
Mm.
On a normal sitcom, characters can get married, they can move, they can switch jobs, they can go off in any number of directions. MASH, it was like this purgatory where they're like stuck in this time and place. And so when we had a new cast member, like we were there for the creation of Charles,
Mm-hmm.
it gave the show new stories and it gave the show different chemistry. And it was really a shot in the arm.
Well, he was someone who could really stand up to the other two and the doctors, right?
Yeah, what we wanted whenever you replace a character, you try to come up with something different. You just don't want to do the old character 2.0. And
Right.
we love Frank Burns, but we thought as an adversary, he was such a straw man
Right.
that we thought, let's bring on a doctor who is even better than Hawkeye and BJ as a surgeon, and is a guy who can really give them a run for their money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did in creating the Charles character.
Yeah. He absolutely
And then
worked.
David Ogden Stiers, which was inspired casting, and that was Gene Reynolds. No, excuse me. I'm sorry. That was Burt Metcalf, who had seen him on an episode of the Mary Tyler Moore Show and said, that guy would be really good. And we had worked with David on the Tony Randall Show. He had done a Tony Randall Show episode that David and I had written. And so we knew him well. We said, yeah. So there was no casting. We never brought in actors. We went right after David Ogden Stiers and hired him, and that was it.
Wow. He and very memorable on the Mary Tyler Moore. He was the programming, the
station owner,
who stuttered, right? It was a different character, very funny on there than his character on MASH. That's amazing.
And he was a different character on ours. He was like a pompous talk show host.
Yeah, he was perfect. You also worked on After MASH. Let's bring up all the shows. And I think were you talking about that, I guess, with Gottfried again. I was listening to that one about the best part of that show for you is you bought a house, basically.
Well, two things. I bought a house, and I got a chance to work with Larry Gelbart.
Right.
And learn from Larry Gelbart. And Larry became a dear friend, and it also helped launch our movie career because Larry would get offered movies and he was busy and couldn't do it, and they'd say, who would you recommend? And Larry would recommend us.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, we're going to lunch with Stanley Donen, and we're getting rewrite assignments and things based on Larry's recommendation. So those were very good things, and we were able to buy the house that I'm still in.
Nice. I won't ask you to repeat these stories. I'll just suggest people listen to Hollywood and Levine. You can listen to that, but you have stories.
Only 387 episodes, people.
Oh, my hat's off. Hat is off.
Yeah,
to you.
they're only like a half hour to 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So
no, it's true. They're brisk. You can go for a run and listen, and you got the whole show. They're great. But you've talked about these meetings with these power players in Hollywood, these studio heads. Some of them are just crazy meetings, bizarre, just the nuttiest guys in their pajamas who are, and go listen to them on the site. And what was that one guy in particular that they wanted to hear that story? Ken, do you know what I mean?
Alan Carr.
Yes, Callan Carr.
Alan Carr, who was a very flamboyant producer. He produced the movie Grease.
Yeah.
And go listen to that story because it's insane.
It is a wild story.
It's insane.
We'll be back with Ken right after these messages. October is filled with thrills and chills on Paramount Plus Canada. Besides new seasons of the espionage thriller Lioness, Trek fans can report for duty when the final season of Star Trek Lower Decks gets underway. And with All Hallows Eve fast approaching, the heart-pounding Peak Screaming Collection is back with a monster-sized lineup of new originals, fan-favorite horror movies, and unforgettable Halloween episodes. This year's fresh batch of frights includes the feature A Quiet Place, Day 1, as well as the new Paramount Plus original Apartment 7A, a mysterious prequel to Rosemary's Baby. Boys and ghouls won't have to look hard for a scare with 10 expertly curated carousels, including killer classics, big screens, big screams, and spooky series. There are even some spooky shenanigans going on at Bikini Bottom in the new SpongeBob SquarePants Halloween special, Keep Away Camp. It's all happening this month on Paramount Plus Canada. Time once again to check in with Emily Gagne to find out what's new on Hollywood Suite. What do you got for us, Emily?
Well, happy Shocktober, Bill. It's my favorite time of the year where we bring all the scary movies to the forefront.
Some scary movies. Okay, well, let's start her off. What do you got?
So if we actually want to get scary, there's the 4K restoration of The Haunting of Julia, which is a really scary movie from the 70s. It stars Mia Farrow, and it is a Canadian co-pro, and I just won't say any more because it's so shocking. You just have to see it for yourself.
Is this like The Haunting of Julia Child where the cake goes flat?
You'll just have to see. There is some intense stuff in the kitchen, I will say.
All right, okay. What is there something that's maybe more family friendly?
Yes, Zombie Town. It's based on R.L. Stein's story. If you know R.L. Stein, he did Goosebumps and all that. But it's got Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase in it, and it's for family. So it's just like the perfect Halloween treat for you and your kids.
That's perfect. You got something for everybody this month on Hollywood Suite. It'll give you goosebumps. Thanks very much, Emily.
Thanks, Bill.
And we're back. What happens with a show like Big Wave Dave? So people won't remember this show. I remember it. I remember watching it and liking it. It had a great cast: Kurtwood Smith,
Adam Arkin, Jane Kaczmarek,
and David Morse. David Morse, what an actor! And it was about a guy who ran a surf shop, right, in Malibu or somewhere.
We sold it to CBS. We basically said we want to do midlife crisis show. We want to do Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. Three guys in their early 40s who are miserable in Chicago, live out a dream and open a surf shop in Hawaii. And our pilot, and we've never had this before. Usually when you're doing a show in front of a live studio audience and you time it beforehand, and it's to time, it's 22 minutes, whatever. Mm-hmm. You're hoping if you have a good audience that you're going to have like a 2.5, 3-minute laugh spread. Mm. Okay. So you've got time to edit things out and to tighten things up, that you've got like an extra 3 minutes. So for the pilot of Big Wave Dave's, we had a 10-minute laugh spread.
Wow.
For a 20-minute show.
Wow.
It was insane.
Yeah.
It was insane.
Yeah.
So we knew CBS wanted this show. They had to pick it up. They wanted to put it on in the fall, but they had commitments to Linda Bloodworth and Diane English, and there was no room for it. So we were going to be on mid-season. And then we got a call from Peter Tortorici at CBS. This was like Memorial Day weekend. And Peter called me and he said, "We want to put you on in the summer. We did this with Northern Exposure and it caught on. We want to put you on Monday night at 9:30 after Murphy Brown, which was like their best show, and do it for 6 weeks." And I said, "Well, when do you want this on the air?" And he goes, "I don't know, like end of July, something like that." And I said, "Look, Peter, in order to physically do the show, because we have to hire a crew, we have to hire a writing staff, we have to have all the sets rebuilt, we have to put together our post-production, we have to do all of that in a matter of days, and we have to be up and running in like 3 weeks. They said the only way we can physically do this is if we have absolutely no network interference whatsoever. No notes, nothing approved. We're not sending you scripts. We're not sending you rough cuts. Nothing. You can come
Wow.
to the table reading and you can watch, and you can come to a network run through and you can watch, and we'll send you the rough cuts and you can watch.
Oh, wow.
But no notes. And I understand if that might be problematic. I respect that. And if so, we'll take our chances that you're going to pick us up for mid-season, and we'll pass on the summer thing. And he said, do it, do the summer thing. And to their credit, to their undying credit, they never gave us notes.
Wow.
They never gave us, and we had, as a result of that, I mean, it was a scramble. I imagine it's like you're the, chairman of the, Democratic campaign, and you're told, oh, we now have Kamala Harris. You got 10 weeks, go.
Funny.
And I'm sure whoever the campaign chair there said, okay, we can do it, but no notes from CBS. So we did that show. It did great. It got like a 19 share. It kept 100% of Murphy Brown's audience. And we said to CBS after it had been on like a few weeks, we said, so why don't you just give us our pickup and we'll continue to be in production? And they go, no, we still have until Labor Day to make the decision. And we're thinking, what decision is there to make?
Yeah.
It's a hit. It's a hit show. And they said Jeff Sagansky was the president of the network, didn't think that Adam was a comedy lead. And they had sitcoms coming in the fall starring Faye Dunaway.
Oh, my God.
Peter Scolari and Shelley Long. And he was like, well, we don't need this show.
Wow.
So they canceled it. But they're all up on YouTube.
They are, okay.
Funny. And there's one episode called Him.
Okay.
That is, of all of the episodes David and I wrote for various shows, our favorite.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Him on YouTube.
Yeah.
Big Wave Dave. Check that out.
Yeah. Him.
I remember. Yeah. No. Fantastic. Yeah. That show you referenced with Faye Dunaway was with Robert Urich. Boy, oh boy, that was wheezy. I remember leaving the press thing like doubled over, like it was like eating bad food. Just not a good show. But
not a good show.
No. Jane Kaczmarek. I remember, again, this is quickly, my first press tour, I'm in Phoenix, and it's 120 degrees out. I'm from Toronto, so I'm going for a swim in the pool. I jump in the pool, and there is Jane Kaczmarek, who was just on the panel that we had seen for a show, Our House, or something, a show about like a big chill kind of TV show. And I thought, God, I got to get out of here. They can't, the cops will be, like, they won't allow a civilian to be swimming with the stars of the TV shows. I felt I better get out before I was caught, but I'll never forget that. But she was a very, very funny on Malcolm and other shows, and Big Wave Dave.
She a wonderful actress, just wonderful. She tested better than any actress in a comedy at CBS since Candice Bergen and Murphy Brown.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
She tested better than Bob Newhart. She
oh
tested
my God.
through the roof.
Wow.
That show got on because of Jane.
That's amazing. Just quickly, one guy I'll miss your podcast episodes. We're speaking about scheduling and networks with Preston Beckman, better known as the Masked Scheduler. You'd have him on every year, I think, or maybe even more frequently to and every time he was on your show, television had changed. You know, you needed somebody like him to explain what television was now, because with streaming and different fast channels, it's mind blowing. So I will miss his contributions there. But how important do you think is scheduling now? I mean, is it still a big factor, or is just everybody watching on demand?
I think it's less of a factor.
Mm-hmm.
I think it becomes less of a factor every year. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there is still a sizable number of people who just watch terrestrial television. But no, it's all changed. It's now all IP, and it's not a matter of necessarily scheduling new shows behind hit shows to help launch them. Now it's Chicago Fire and Chicago Dogcatcher and NCIS Pittsburgh, and
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Do you fear that we're not just in a down cycle with sitcoms, but that the genre maybe has hit a wall?
I think people always want to laugh. I think somebody's going to come along and do, I mean, I remember in the early 80s, this is before Cheers was on, and everyone was saying that sitcoms were dead, and that a lot of sitcom writers were writing hour spec scripts that had some humor in it, like Simon and Simon and Magnum PI and Crazy Like a Fox and things like that. It was kind of an emerging genre. And shows like Cheers is not really landing. And then Cosby.
Yeah.
And flash forward even like 10 years later, and there was like a glut of sitcoms. There was a million sitcoms. There was first-run syndication sitcoms. There was probably 30 different sitcoms on the air at the same time. So, I don't know. The problem is, like, say, Ted Lasso, it was a very good show, was very funny at times, won a bunch of Emmys. How many people in the country, what percentage gets Apple TV?
Right.
Okay. I bet 80% of the country has never seen an episode of Ted Lasso. And if you don't have Apple, you won't.
Right.
So at least, there's a show called Cheers. And, your friend is recommending it to you.
Yeah.
You can go and turn on your TV the next week.
Right.
And find it. Yeah. On NBC, there's Cheers. But if they recommend Ted Lasso, you go,
right.
What? I don't know what that is. I don't have Apple.
Yeah.
I'm not spending $12 a month to see Ted Lasso.
It even goes beyond that. When you think like the show that's the most nominated for the comedy category now at the Emmys is, I think, The Bear.
Right, which isn't a comedy.
Right.
Yeah, it's not a comedy.
Yeah.
And what does it say when Frasier gets nominated for nothing?
Right. Yeah, never did. Exactly. Or Bob Newhart, or, all these great shows, but astounding. Yeah. You guys won an Emmy. Was that for MASH? Was that for
Cheers?
What? Cheers.
For
Okay.
Cheers.
Yeah.
We lost a bunch of Emmys for MASH, but yeah, we won for Cheers.
Yeah. It is. I think it's almost like watching a Canadian television awards now, because the audience has not seen the shows.
Right.
You're just going to have to trust that these are the best ones because no one has seen them. And that seems to be where the Emmys, that's no wonder the ratings are down.
Sure.
Speaking of which, do you watch much TV now, or do you have a favorite show? Are you streaming something?
I watch Jeopardy.
Yeah.
I watch baseball.
Yeah.
I watch too much MSNBC.
Right.
But certain shows will come along that will stream and like. Loved Hacks, loved Lupin, loved Reacher. I could say I was very disappointed by the new updated version of Justified. Loved the original Justified.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a Canadian showrunner there. Graham Yost does slow horses. Yeah.
Brilliant writer. So a show will come along and we'll catch up and watch it. But no, there's nothing. There's certainly no comedies. I was inspired by comedies. I would watch All in the Family and the Mary Tyler Moore Show and the Bob Newhart Show, and I would laugh out loud. The Odd Couple, and it inspired me to want to do that. Now, in terms of comedy, The Daily Show. Right.
Yeah. No, it's hard to find, or you can find a funny 5 minutes the next day on your phone of something on a late night show sometimes. But yeah, it's tough. Never used to be that way. When you were wrapping things up, you've been very generous with your time. Was there a show when you were growing up, a youngster, that you would rush home to see, or you just loved? Was there a favorite?
Topper.
Topper. Wow, Topper. I love Topper. Leo
I was really little, but I had a crush on Ann Jeffries, and
that's understandable.
I love Topper. Honeymooners. Honeymooners is my all-time favorite show.
Wow,
those 39 episodes. Phil Silver's show still holds up. Hilarious.
That is a brilliant show, isn't it?
Nat Hiken, what a brilliant comedy writer.
Car 54.
Yep, he did Car 54. Yeah. Where Are You as well?
Yeah, very smart. I have a couple of Bilkos. I've got one Honeymooners, the $99,000 question on 16 millimeter.
When that episode aired, I was, it had aired like in the 50s, but it was rerunning. And I remember I was 9 years old, and I saw the $99,000 answer for the first time. And of course, for those who haven't seen it, Ralph is on a game show where he has to identify songs, and he has a week to prepare. They rent a piano, and Norton is playing all of the songs, but has this intro lead up that he does, Swanee River, that drives Ralph crazy. And you can see by the end of the week, Ralph knows every song from every movie and everything. And he goes onto the show, and they do the first question, and it's the intro, it's Swanee River, and he doesn't know it. Yeah. Okay. I'm 9 years old. I did not see that coming. It is the biggest laugh I have ever had in my life.
It is.
I laughed for 5 minutes. And I said to David, at one point, I said, I want us to write that show. I want us to write a show that does that. And we had an idea, we pitched it on Cheers, and they let us do it. And it worked. It was the episode where Lilith and Frasier were concerned that little Freddie hadn't talked yet.
Right.
And Frasier takes him to the bar the whole time. And we set up a subplot where they put parking meters up on the street. So Norm had to go and feed the meter all the time, going back and forth and back and forth. So there was always the Norm entrances, et cetera, et cetera. And at the end, Lilith comes in and she sees Frasier with the baby, and she's furious at him. What a terrible parent. He's never going to learn to talk, blah, blah, blah. And then Norm comes in and the baby goes Norm. Okay.
Brilliant.
Well, again, giant laugh from the audience.
Yeah.
Just a giant laugh from the audience. But you're building an entire show to one joke. And if the joke doesn't work, your whole episode is dead.
Yeah.
Okay. So we built it to that joke. The joke worked. We turned to each other and we said, never again. Never again are we going to do this.
That was brilliant.
It's called Breaking In is Hard to Do.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That was part 2 with Ken Levine, a terrific storyteller and a generous man. Thank you, Ken, once again for this conversation. Ken, please check him out. He's still writing plays. He's drawing cartoons for the New Yorker. Look for him whenever on CNN or when other networks do history of TV comedy and other TV documentaries. He's often one of the go-to guys, very insightful and a very funny commentator. Thanks to the nimble producer who pulled these stories together here at Brio TV, Phil Hong. Give it up to BJ Del Conte, Paul Boudra, and all the crispy critters, as well as piano man Stephen Dudley, for the music you hear on this podcast. Finally, thanks to you, listener, and if you enjoyed this conversation, let us know with a like or a comment at Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Bill Brio. Thanks for listening.